Welcome to The Beautiful Mess with Jane and Jess. My name is Jess Basson, and here is my amazing co-host, Jane Linley-Thomas. Hello, dear friend. How are you today?
Hello, my darling. I'm so good, thank you. And I'm really excited about this conversation because I know, the beautiful mess is all about the kind of merging of the beautiful and the messy and kind of deep diving into conversations around curiosity and choice and connection. So I'm really excited about today.
I am too, because as moms, we both know how tricky it is to manage that messy, beautiful path of your children unfolding, growing, who they're going to become, what are they going to do. And I feel like there are some very specific phases in the mothering journey where we actually just need some help. Like we need someone to come and help us figure out how to make big choices, like what schools our kids go to, what kind of educations they have, what subjects they choose, what happens after school, like university, college, gap years. And Jane, you and I are both parents, some very interesting children, some that fit into the box, some that march to the beat of their own drum. And I know that I could just take all the wisdom that there is. So I'm very excited for us to be inviting a guest onto the Beautiful Mess today. We have got Naretha Pretorius with us, and Naretha is the campus head at the IIE-Vega School in Lucia, private higher education institution. But Naretha, you're also more than just someone who's been in education for a long, long time. You're a mom as well. You're an artist. You're a coach. You get both the ins and the outs, the internal and the external of parenting our kids through their education journey. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Really excited to have this conversation. Hi. And what a messy process it can be sometimes, being a parent.
Yeah, it's a tough journey. I mean, I've got 3 children, one that attends alternative schooling, one that attends remedial schooling, and one that is a mainstreamer. All the same parents, all the same love, all the same womb, all the same opportunities, but actually couldn't be more different. And trying to navigate that sometimes is really overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jane,
you've had to get me into the conversation.
Well, we're glad you're here because Jane and I were talking about this earlier about how we've had to figure out that our kids are unique. And so, I mean, Naretha, as someone in education, you see parents coming through with certain expectations of their kids and what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing. And how do we as parents figure out what the right step is? Like Jane is raising 3 children who are very different in the same home, coming from the same context, but they're not the same people. What have you learned and noticed along the way that parents get right or completely miss?
This is a very interesting question. Okay, so just to contextualize, I've got 2 boys. They're still very young. And Jess, we actually live quite close to each other. And I've become very much aware that even at a young age, my boys are 9 and 13 now. So my 13-year-old is that kind of kid that just knows exactly what he's going to do after school. So his path is quite straightforward, but it's also because he's a super logical kid. So he's a very decision-making kind of kid. He's already got his path very clear. He knows what's going to happen after he's done his postgrad. He's 13 years old. My 9-year-old, when you ask him, what are you going to do one day? His response would be, I just want to play the drums. Okay, so also 2 very different children. What have I observed? I'm in higher education, and the reality that we're also facing as parents with, I think especially these days, I mean, we've had a tough few years behind us. And a sense of uncertainty is the biggest anxiety that I pick up with parents and learners, but to be honest, a little bit more within parents than what I pick it up sometimes with learners. And the anxiety, I think, is what's the future going to hold for them? What are they going to become? If we as parents have tough times, we see around us that companies have to close down because of, unrest, and then we get the flooding and we soon get more flooding. Uncertainty of future, but also often I find that parents put on their own fears of you know, what happened in my past and what did I want to become that never either happened or. So as parents, we sometimes make the mistake of just actually forgetting to look at the person right in front of us. The answer is right in front of us. If I were to ask both of you, when you looked at your children when they were much younger, the signs already there of what the potential future for them holds. The first answer is, if we talk about subject choices, for example, it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning of what it leads and guides them into where they can go. When they were little, I'm sure if I ask any parent, I would use my own children. My little one, the very little one, didn't have a dummy. He didn't want a comfort blankie. All he wanted to take to bed, and it doesn't matter which one, but it was a Lego block. As long as Lego goes to bed with him, then he's happy. My oldest son from little was already into IT. So a lot of the things are often right in front of us. Jess, I know that your kids climb a tree really high. My younger one is like that. He's a little bit more of a wild one. He's the one that will stay up on the dance floor. He's the more outgoing one. So within higher education, what often people are anxious about is, what am I going to study? What career am I going to go into if our future is a little bit, you know, you question your future. So there's a perception that there's not enough job opportunities, etc., etc. So what I'd love to point out today is the starting point of subject choices. And that starts when you have to make a decision in your grade 9 of what subjects you're going to choose. So let's maybe play a little bit with these three things that we mentioned. One is the choice, and the question might be, whose choice is it? Then there's a sense of curiosity, and I'd love for us to maybe also talk about the word connect. So where would we start?
Well, can I just start by saying, I think you've really highlighted something so important, that yes, this conversation is around navigating the young people, but it's also about holding space for the parent that's listening to this conversation, saying there's such profoundness that Jess and I always talk about, and the saying me too. So if you've stayed up at night tossing and turning between your sheets and the bed because you are so anxious about what the future holds for your child, me too. If you are worried that your history of how you deemed your academic success may affect them, me too. If you're worried about, will there be a space for my child in the workforce if they're not keeping up at school right now, me too. So I just need to say, we're holding space for you, and we see you and we feel you, and hopefully together we'll navigate a few conversations that can help soothe you. Because if we had the answers and all the answers, and we could say, don't worry, don't give it another thought, your child will be absolutely fine, I think we'd all sleep a lot better tonight. But we can't do that. But we can talk about conversations that hopefully can, empower you and soothe you, and always reminding you that you're doing so much better than you think. Because I think as moms, we grill ourselves so hard. And actually, at the end of the day, you know, this word and these words always come throughout the work that I do with psychologist Paul Bushell, kindness can, is the greatest gift you can ever give your child is you.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, and I just, Jane, what you've touched on there is that anxiety that parents feel about setting their kids up for success. And Naretha, you were talking about the idea of choice. I mean, the idea of subject choices for me, it just freaks me out because I don't know if it's true or not, but you get this feeling that this is make or break. Like what you decide now, this is the rest of your life. I mean, I remember my matric teacher, like the head of grade, saying to us, you will be asked what your matric results are for the rest of your life. I'm 55 and I still get asked, what did you get in matric? You know, and there's a sort of like, it's now or never. And if you stuff this up, you are ruining your children. So I think because of that thing, which you can tell us how we should navigate that because we need help. But I think because of that, a lot of parents don't want to give their kids the choice because they are stressed out and they're certain. Like we feel like, listen, this is too big a responsibility for you, little 15-year-old. I'm making this decision because I know best. Like, how do we navigate giving our kids choice when there's so much at stake?
Well, maybe let's take what's at stake a little bit away. So let's relax a little bit, take the weight off. It's not that bad. It's not that bad. So if we maybe just go, okay, parents, you don't have to actually make the choice. That's step one. You don't have to. Whose choice is it? It's really, it is for, we need to put the person back into this. So these call it two parties at play here. One, the parent. Let's maybe talk about what's the role the parent can play. So let's take the pressure off a little bit and say the best thing a parent can do is, one, you know your child, observe them, listen carefully. All the answers are right in front of you of how to help, just purely facilitate and help make the decision with them, but not for them. So how do we guide them rather to make the choice? If you don't let them make the choice, that's even worse, because what will happen? I didn't make the decision, I didn't choose that direction, and then I didn't own it, versus I'd rather my child, even though all people make mistakes, so allow them also to make some mistakes. All people fail at some point. I know you don't want to hear that word, parents, but we all did. We all traveled that journey of a few mistakes we had to make. And frankly, our children at that age is also a beautiful mess, as much as the parents are. So let's remove a little bit of a mess for them, and let's maybe say, how do we simplify it a little bit? So here's the simplicity of this complexity. A parent can be the person that holds it for them. Just hold it together. And that togetherness is the other part that I wanted to talk about, is how do you genuinely connect with your child? So one, the good news is the answer is right in front of you. You know your child's personality. You know what they like and dislike. You know what their natural way of being and doing is. So when we make subject choices, the first thing that you need to acknowledge is, who is my child right in front of me? What kind of personality do they have? What is their natural way of being? Prof. Zak, now we've collaborated a few times with him, and he's just that guru in the career counseling space. And he talks particularly about your way of doing and being is informed by your way of thinking, which means we all have a mode of thinking. You're naturally wired in a certain way. You can't change it. It's who you are. The more you go naturally with that flow, the better things just flow in general, be that your subject choices that you make, your career choices that you make. We all actually know, for instance, I'm a creative. Don't ever let me not be creative. It's impossible. It's my way of living. It's my way of being. So Prof. Nell would, for instance, say, if you are more aware of their mode of thinking, so that be, is your child more of an analytical, logical thinker? Are they more of a divergent, expressive, creative thinker? And it shows up in their way of doing. It shows up in their use of language and just naturally the things that they do. If you've got a very diverse child, they love everything and they're energetic, then they need to go into a career that allows for that embraces that. If they're an outgoing person, you're not going to subdue that personality. So subject choices is purely the beginning of it. And let's simplify it. And you need to make a decision of 4 subjects which you don't have a choice in. Yes, we don't have a choice. The only choice that sits there, is it going to be maths lit or is it going to be maths core? And you do not go for maths core unless the child can really do it. So part of subject choices is make the decision first by knowing the person, and then you can do some homework. So what options are on the table? And maybe do an exercise. We can say, well, let's do a little checklist. Which subjects do you love doing? You find it either more interesting. My kid will possibly say, no, I hate school, Mom, I don't want to do anything. But get it out of them. What do they find a little bit more interesting? Or they perform naturally better in it? What do they find a bit more interesting? Which ones do they find really, really hard? And so you can make a little table to just get a sense of where do they sit with subjects. That's step 1. Step 2 is latch it onto their natural way of being. So if there's now 3 subjects to choose from, your electives, purely take it from, hello Jane, we're back. Take it from, I would rather go into, let's say, where it's about storytelling, or it's about languages, or it's about facts, and then you can go, okay, cool, you're going to be more. Or my kid is more naturally inclined to IT or computer arts, then do IT or computer arts. So it's actually quite simple if you also just said that subject choice is just the beginning. but make sure it makes sense to the person sitting right in front of you. Don't go against the grain.
Oh, we don't have Jane on.
If I look
there you go, Jane. We've got you back now. What were you saying, friend?
Am I back?
Yes.
I think, you know, when I grew up, when I was at school, there were no options. You know what I mean? Like, people weren't talking about remedial schooling. They weren't talking about medication. They weren't talking about, and you can't blame the generation of parenting then. You know what I mean? I think the generation now is a lot more woke. So we've got a lot more information at our disposal, but that can also make it a little bit overwhelming. But it's also quite exciting that there is a space for everyone's child in the system. And I use system very loosely. I remember subject choices basically just going like, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Okay, cool. As long as I can do drama, I'm happy. Because I knew that what made me resonant and made me happy at school was being around people and sense of community. So a lot of people wouldn't deem that as a subject choice, but being around people lit my brain up. And I knew that that was when my heart was open, and I knew that that was when I was in the best place to learn.
Yes, yes, exactly. And Jane, that's a beautiful, and in my days, there was one school to choose from. So I don't know, it's like, there's the school, those are your subjects. From my side, it's like, as long as I'm going to do art, as long as I'm going to do anything that is creative. So that could have been language, it could have been storytelling, it could be anything that's expressive. I unfortunately didn't have, I don't think there was drama in my school. There was always drama in the school, but not the subject. I possibly created the drama. But so if we so look at it from if you take subject choices and you go, okay, cool. Firstly, just do what you think you're going to naturally want to do. Then you need to go, but where does it take me? Okay, so the next step is, well, I guess they want to study after school. So if they think a little bit about where to the future, that's the other daunting thing that I've picked up. People are like, there are now so many options. You're no longer preparing someone for a job. You are preparing someone for a career. Let's add a little bit more. We're not just preparing you for a career. Surely you would like a purposeful, meaningful, fulfilling life. That makes it almost more daunting. But if you take it right back at your core, what is the thing that you naturally love doing? And what are the things that you naturally just steer away from? You can't. It's not your thing. Just go back to the core. That should guide you into the possibilities of where you're going. Should be as simple as that. Don't fight it.
You know, it's so interesting to hear you say that, because I think as parents, there's this tension of, well, this is who you are, but this is who you could be. And I know for me, like I did well academically at school, and the tension was I could do maths and science and biology, but what I loved to do was English and history and drama. And so looking back now, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Like, what made me come alive were the arts. But I did science and bio and, you know, all those subjects, got to university and did a BCom, which was so not what I loved, but I could pull it off. And I think sometimes that's a tricky one for parents to navigate, is, you know, the sort of safe road versus the road that makes your child come alive and that they enjoy. And the irony is, of course, that I've come full circle to the English and the writing and the expression and the drama and the communication, and didn't end up doing things that I could do. That's an interesting one. Like, how do you navigate the secure, well-trodden road? I mean, Jane, you and I have both had to reimagine what our children's education looks like, because there's a well-trodden path and then there's off the beaten path. How did you do that, Jane? What guided you through that?
Okay. So I think, you know, one of the things that really set me free on my parenting journey, and it doesn't just pertain to subject choices and schooling, is trying to really navigate and get in control of the fear. Because I think if you parent from a place of fear, you become so small and you become so isolated. So, you know, when I started the journey of placing my children into the education system, it would have been so much easier to put all three of them in the same school. You know, blanket approach to education, go to school to learn to read and write. But when I started looking at my children individually as people, it was so glaringly obvious that they all resonated in different spaces. So for my eldest, who's turning 12 in a few days' time, after a lot of mainstream ins and outs, we realized that he would actually thrive a lot better in an more of an alternative schooling environment. And for me, success is when he gets up on a Monday morning and says to me, I cannot wait to go to school today. That is like, boom, that is success. Because if you are happy when you go to school, what happens again? Your heart is open, your head is open. And I just want my children to arrive in the world, being able to read and write would be KIF, being able to balance a kind of checkbook so they can run their own little business one day and really lean into what their skill sets are. So what is my first skill set? My first skill set, son, is alternative schooling, where he learns through senses and he loves to go there and he's happy and he's confident. My second child, one of my twins, is a remedial candidate. Again, we've seen every specialist in KZN. If they've got an IST and IST on the end of their word, we've seen them. Okay, any specialist, we've seen them. So remedial, because you've got some dyslexia and you were born with a tongue tie, you've got some auditory processing and some speech issues, go into heavy remediation. Confidence starts to grow because all of a sudden I can keep up and I can contribute and I have a voice. And then I've got the mainstreamer who's just happy to go and just get stuck in. So for me, the greatest liberation was realizing that my children are different and their potential and their living up to their best version of them is not what I deem their best version of them. I'm there for them to get home and be the loving embrace, the person that makes sure that you have manners, the person that makes sure that you brush your teeth and you pick up your towel, that you can go into a room and look people in the eyes, can give them a firm handshake, can introduce yourself, can be confident. Because let's be honest, guys, we all know that the world holds space for people that arrive open, ready to love, ready to receive, and okay with who they are in themselves. How many adults do we know in the room that are still battling with that kind of stuff?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you've both actually really blown the water like wide open and just on the full child, the whole child. And what I'm reminded of is that kids will learn and they will thrive and they will find a career that is meaningful, purposeful, rewarding, financially, able to support them when their hearts are open, when they are engaged. That connection is so important. And Naretha, you've said a few things today that I think are so key for us as parents, that we really have to be curious about who our child actually is. What is their mode of thinking? I love what you said that. I feel like I need to go and learn about it for my children, but what is their learning style? Like, what is their mode of thinking? That we need to be able to give them autonomy and empowerment, because they won't succeed if they're not invested and they don't actually care. And you've said this is what you will do. Like, no one's going to reach their potential with that kind of imposed future on them. If they own it, they'll lean into it. But Jane, I think what you've always, you preach it, you teach it, but you live it, is connection, and being connected to our kids, that you can talk. And you could say, you know what, boy, this is how your brain works. And we are going to help you use your brain and come alive. And just as we kind of wrap up, my husband's got a tattoo that says, don't ask what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And that for me is like, the fear dissipates, and things like subject choices and these make or break seasons of our kids' education, sure, we just want them to be fully alive human beings at the end of the day.
And Jess, can I latch onto that? The curiosity sits with both us as parents and that way that we build a relationship with our children to genuinely get to know what makes our children feel alive and happy, but also the opposite. What are the things that really drag them down, and how can we, elevate that a little bit? I think as any human being, if we can pass the sense of curiosity onto our children, how can they be more curious about what are all the options and possibilities out there? our perception, and depends on our age and our generation, may only be familiar with our own territory that we work in or the mainstream kind of careers that are out there. There's so much more. There's so much more that they can become. If we help them to be more curious, and like I said in the beginning, do it with them, not for them. That's that connection. It's that relationship you have with them. It's the conversations you have. Let's have a look at what is out there. Let's do a little bit of research. What do you do if you're a this or a that? And see what they latch onto naturally. See what excites them, even if you start with little bits. But the curiosity sits in us as parents and how we know our children and be more aware and maybe a little bit more honest with ourselves too. Stop listening to what other people say. They're right in front of you. Connect with them. And then latch onto the things that they start to become more curious about. Then it will flow. Then it removes the fear. It brings in happiness. Like you say, Jane, we just need to help support them. You know, give a good handshake and people in the eye when you greet them. But confident beings that are curious and excited. The more they involved in it, the more they involved in the process, the more excited they'll be. The more empowered they will feel. At the end, bring it back to subject choices. There's really only so many you need to choose from. So choose the ones that make sense and that they can get a little bit excited about. And like you say, the big win is if they have a sense of, I feel alive. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for supporting me. That's the best we can give as parents.
I think there's always, just from on a closing on my side, I think there's always this fear of failure as a parent. Like, you know, will I be failing you if you choose the wrong subject, or will I be failing you if I don't make the right decision for you? And I'm always reminded and kind of soothed again that, you know, in failure is great teaching. And when we fail as parents, just to remind ourselves that yes, it's really uncomfortable, but it also role models to our children that we are not mechanical. We don't come out of a factory with a program inside of us. We are people that are flawed and we get things wrong a lot of time, and in turn that gives our children access to being able to live a life of peaks and troughs, highs and lows, because managing an expectation of getting it right all the time is also very unhealthy. So whatever you're dealing with today, may it be subject choices or schooling or whatever you're challenged with, because let's be honest, parenting is a dance. We go 2 steps to the right and it is in tempo and in rhythm, and then you stand on your foot and it all fall down. So just go gently. You know, I think that's also a really important word to integrate into parenting, is to be compassionate and gentle with yourself. And if you drop the ball, just reminding yourself that they're not all made of glass and some of them actually bounce and roll under the couch. It's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's gonna be okay.
It's going to be okay. So everybody, if you are listening, dear heart, just say that out loud to yourself with us right now. It's going to be okay. So thank you for helping us land there for this beautiful, messy conversation, the beautiful adventure of figuring out who our children are, what makes them come alive, and also the mess of getting that wrong. And that at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. This has been such a great conversation, and we love sharing the beautiful mess with our friends, family, far and wide. So thank you for joining us. And yeah, stay kind, stay compassionate, and if we take one thing out, we're all going to whisper to ourselves for the rest of today. It's going to be okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and bye.
Thank you. Bye.